Leading Britain's conversation, The Nigel Farage Show.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. Well, I'm here in Washington at the annual Conservative Conference. There are 10,000 delegates. You can probably see some of them milling around behind me. It's an atmosphere here of high excitement because the Republican Party won the election against the expectations of many. And at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, taking the stage will be the 45th President of the United States of America, one Donald J. Trump. And, unbelievably, there's a foreigner speaking here as well, despite the tough new rules they want to bring in. And I'll be speaking here at midday, which I'm pretty excited about. More on that over the course of the next hour. But today, we had the official statistics out for immigration into the United Kingdom last year. The net figure, that's after people have come in and gone out, the net official figure shows that 273,000 extra people came into the country last year. That is a drop of 59,000 from the previous quarter, the previous year. But interestingly, from Romania and Bulgaria, the figure was up. Now, I have to apologize right now to the nation because in 2014 I said, when we opened the doors to Romania and Bulgaria, that I thought up to 50,000 people a year might come. I was, of course, condemned, laughed at, and as that European election campaign got into swing, we even had Nick Robinson of the BBC suggesting that basically what I'd said was a fabrication. Well, I now apologise for saying that up to 50,000 people a year would come from Romania and Bulgaria. The figure for the last year is 74,000. So I was wrong. I underestimated it by nearly 50%. The point is that with Article 50 about to be triggered, perhaps in just 2.5 weeks' time, could there not be, in that 2-year negotiating period, possibly a massive flood of people that come from Romania or Bulgaria or come from a country like Greece, where the economy is in a total mess and where they need another bailout of the euro? And I'm asking the question, given that risk, given that we have an open door, is it not time for the British government to apply an emergency brake and to say to our friends in Brussels, it's no longer going to be an open door. We need to see people who've genuinely got jobs to come to. Now, to get involved in this debate, please call me on 0345 6060 973. Text me on 84850. You can tweet me at LBC using the hashtag Farage and LBC. And you can watch the show live on LBC's Facebook page from here in the conference centre in Washington. And our first caller this evening is Americo in Queen's Park. Good evening.
Hi, Mr. Farage. I would like to ask
Yes,
you, why are you calling for an emergency break on EU immigration now when you could have asked for that for years?
Well, yes, of course, that is absolutely right. I wish that British governments had tried with our EU partners to put an emergency brake in place. But the reality is we voted to leave. We are leaving. But the Article 50 process drags this out for a further 2 years. And I'm genuinely worried.
My question is more like, if this is something that UK could have done all these years, why do you need to do Brexit if you could have done an emergency break in immigration for years?
Well, I think the reality would have been, prior to Brexit, that even to attempt to get an emergency brake would not have been allowed. And David Cameron wanted this to be part of his renegotiation strategy, and Angela Merkel vetoed it. So what I'm suggesting, Americo, is that we don't go to Brussels on bended knee and say, please, can we have an emergency brake? I'm suggesting we go to Brussels and the next big summit is on the 10th of March. I'll be there. It's the day after Theresa May is going to trigger Article 50. And I suggest what we say is we are applying an emergency brake because we're worried, once that 2-year period has been triggered, that just uncontrollable numbers of people could come into our country. That is my suggestion, Americo. How could that possibly be seen to be unreasonable?
No. What I find unreasonable is that you could have asked for this for years. Then when you had
We could.
very high levels of immigration from the EU, you could have called for this before without necessarily
America,
calling for leaving the EU.
I take your point, but they would never have given it to us. That, I'm afraid, is the reality. That, in the end, is why Cameron's negotiation failed, as dismally as it did, and we did, in my own view, joyously vote Brexit. So I'm suggesting we don't beg for an emergency break, we apply one. I wonder what Tim in Burskoff makes of this debate. Tim, good evening.
Hi, Nigel. Nice to talk to you.
Thank you.
The reason I'm calling isn't so much about the emergency break right now. It's more about obviously the net migration figures came out today. And it's just become commonplace now just to hear about the net migration figure from not just the media, even politicians of all stripes use this figure almost solely now, as opposed to the gross figures of how many come in and how many leave. And it's even, it's a bit like, I know you don't like that, neither do I, the people use Europe as instead of European Union. And it's just like
Sure.
even on Sky today, it said 273,000 people came into the country last year. They didn't. 596,000 came in, 323,000 left. And so that figure.
Tim, your point. Tim, your point is very relevant in one regard, because in many years over the last decade, we've seen a net figure. What we haven't looked at is a lot of the people leaving have been British people leaving to retire to Spain or,
that's
buy
exactly
a place
the point
in
I was
Normandy.
going to make, Nigel. We need to look at the birth rates of people coming in and leaving. If we lose 500,000 pensioners and 500,000 young couples with high birth rates come in, then not only have we lost 2 people and 2 come in, net migration 0, nothing to worry about. If you're trying to plan for primary school places or something, you tell net migration 0, then of course it's meaningless because, you can't plan on that basis, never mind future generations of just those people, so
Tim,
it doesn't make sense.
Tim, you make a very, very powerful point that net migration figures alone do not give the full picture. I thank you for that point. It's valuable. And not only is Tim right about the fact that it's younger people coming in and generally older people leaving, which means higher birth rates, etc. The other point, I think, that's important is the sheer demographic change in our country. It isn't 273,000. It is maybe 500,000 people a year. And that is literally the thing that has changed the shape of our communities, that has made so many people feel ill at ease. Your Facebook messages coming in. Seema Sud says, David Davis says, we still need immigration from the EU. So what's your problem? We don't have an open door. Check your facts, Nigel. Make and impose stronger controls straight away. Well, I'm going to just have a quick look at my passport here. It purports to be a British passport, but actually the first 2 words on it are European Union, Seema, and anybody in the European Union is free to come to this country for at least the next 2 years. David Davis yesterday suggested it could be even longer, and we could argue, Seema, about the rights and wrongs economically of huge numbers of unskilled people coming into Britain from the European Union. The point I made last night was actually what we voted for was for fewer people to come, and I'm now worried, looking at those figures, particularly from Romania and Bulgaria, that this thing looks to me to be out of control. Justin Hughes on Facebook says, Nigel, you mentioned years ago that Romania and Bulgaria would come in record numbers. And once again, you're right. People really need to start listening to you. Well, thank you. Cheryl Parker says, an emergency break was always an option. Government didn't use it. Well, Cheryl, we did need the agreement of our EU partners. That really is the point. I wonder what Mark in Cambridge. Are you happy, Mark, that 74,000 people came in from Romania and Bulgaria? Do you think it's a good thing?
I don't think it's necessarily a good thing, but I do think it's important that as Britain, we act, we make sure that we follow the law at all times. In other words, if they're allowed to come in at the moment, then they should be allowed to come in. I think it's very, very difficult to know how to control the numbers coming in the near future? For example, do we place people who have come in after the referendum was taken in questionable circumstances? In other words, we go through the Brexit process. Do we then retrospectively look back and say, well, who has come in since the referendum vote? Should they be allowed to stay? Or you could go,
Mark,
we'll have a fixed. Yeah.
Mark, I don't believe a civilized country ever does this retrospectively, which is why nobody in the Leave campaign at any point said that EU citizens that come to this country legally, albeit I thought there were too many, but had come to this country legally, nobody ever suggested that their rights to stay would be altered by the referendum result. And that does apply to the last 7 or 8 months. What I'm really suggesting is that the government actually says something, that the government says, right, from next month, this is going to be different. From next month, we are going to say we're going to restrict the number of people that come. And then I think we're playing fair and being open with people. Would that sound reasonable?
I'm totally in agreement with you. You should be fair. So people should know what their situation is. In other words, there should be no doubt. If they come in after a certain date, their rights will have changed, etc., etc. I think it's difficult to put a definite date. So we go through the Brexit process, then are the government going to go, well, after this date, things are going to change? Because as you know, give a date, then it could encourage lots of people to come in.
Yeah, no, I get that.
It's very, very difficult to manage this fairly.
It is difficult. Mark, all I want to see is some resolve. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show exclusively here on LBC at a Conservative conference in Washington. It is 7:15.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
Prison governors will be responsible for getting inmates off drugs and into work under a bill to be published today. It's called one of the biggest shake-ups in prisons for decades.
Glyn Travis is Assistant Secretary for the Prison Officers Association.
Mobile phones, drugs and everything else are coming in by the use of technology, drones being thrown over prison perimeters.
Prison officers?
Yes, staff, and I don't mean prison officers, staff who work in prisons are being corrupted because the pay is poor and people now we're being tempted by corruption.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast every weekday morning from 7, only on LBC.
With Hampton by Hilton, making you welcome at over 40 hotels in Europe.
Do you have a pension? Maybe you've got more than one. How do you know if they're in the right pension funds, making as much money as possible for your retirement? Answer is, you probably don't. At The Pension Works, our fully qualified independent financial advisors could add instant value to your retirement fund. Simply text the word YES to 83222 for your free Pension Works health check. That's YES to 83222 today. Your pensions working harder with The Pension Works.
Travel Pack. Have the right flight at the right price. In fact, we'll price match most worldwide flights if you find one cheaper elsewhere at the time of booking. So, if you need to book a flight, remember the Travel Pack price match. Call Travel Pack on 0208 903 9999. You won't find a better price for your flight. Travel Pack 0208 903 9999. ATOL protected. Excludes low-cost operators. Competitors must be ATOL licensed. Conditions apply.
Let's not go home yet, Wilbur. There's a new film out with penguins in. Change of plans. You can control your heating from your phone wherever you are with Hive Active Heating. It's just £9 a month exclusive to British Gas customers, and you won't pay anything up front. You'll never need to heat an empty home or come back to a cold one again. Shh, Wilbur, the film's starting. Control your heating from your phone for just £9 a month. Search British Gas Hive. Conditions, exclusions and cancellation charges apply.
This is a live update for UK businesses. Right now, you can find essential information and services about selling overseas through the government's website for exporters. Find the right information and help to grow your business. Visit great.gov.uk.
At Oak Furnitureland, everyone knows our furniture is 100% real hardwood.
And it's also 50% off.
But most importantly, it's 100% real hardwood.
Yes, but don't forget it's also 50% off.
Make sure you don't miss Oak Furnitureland's biggest ever winter sale, where everything's 100% real hardwood with up to 50% off. Our biggest ever winter sale ends Sunday. Plus, this weekend only, get 2 free gifts worth up to £600 when you spend £1,500.
Whether your business is carpentry, catering, or dog grooming, in an ever-changing economy, HSBC could help your business grow. Last year, we approved 91% of business lending for startups and businesses switching to us. For an indication of loan eligibility in just 2 minutes, search HSBC Business Lending.
Approval rate based on lending approvals up to £30,000 in 2016. Subject to credit status. Results of business lending eligibility checker indicative only. T's and C's apply. See website.
This is LBC, the Nigel Farage Show. Live from Washington. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Tweet at LBC using the hashtag Farage on LBC.
Yes, Nigel Farage is in Washington, and I'm Clive Bull here in London, and this is interesting. The reason Nigel is there is he's at the CPAC conference in Washington, the Conservative Political Action Conference, and he's been broadcasting his programme live from that conference. If you were watching on Facebook, you could see him there with the delegates all wandering around behind him. However, in the last couple of minutes, and Nigel should be back with us, but in the last couple of minutes, a security sweep has taken place. The American Secret Service have been in there and basically cleared the entire hall. Everybody, they didn't know it was going to happen. Everybody's been cleared, including Nigel, and there's just an empty microphone there at the moment. But there are no exceptions. Doesn't matter if you're broadcasting a live radio programme. Everybody was cleared from the room. So we're hoping that they will be allowed back in at some point. But in the meantime, we're just going to have to take your calls. And I think Nigel will be listening, but he will be probably standing outside thanks to the Secret Service. So as soon as they get back in the room, we'll resume the broadcast from Washington. But in the meantime, we can still take your calls on this issue here in London. So I'm going to go to Antonio in Willesden. Hello, Antonio.
Hi, good evening. I hope, first of all, Nigel is okay and he hasn't come to any harm.
Yeah, I don't think there's actually a security incident. I think they're just sweeping the room and clearing everybody out. But we'll keep you updated on that. But what would you like to say as a point anyway?
Okay, so I'm a Portuguese citizen. My passport, funnily enough, says EU and Portugal. It doesn't make me any less Portuguese. I've been in the UK 29 years. There's about 175,000 of my compatriots in this country, and there's about, and I do stand to be corrected, about 110,000 British citizens in the UK, in Portugal, I beg your pardon. 4 of them I've personally helped move to my country, where they are more than welcome. My question to Nigel is, what does he have so much strongly against the likes of me moving to the UK? And what has he got to say to fellow Brits living in Portugal who are currently at this moment in turmoil about their futures? What is it that disgusts him?
Are you in turmoil? How concerned are you?
I'm extremely concerned. I've had family go home. I've had friends assaulted on the streets of London. I've had people spat at for speaking Portuguese. I've been in this country 29 years. I'm gladly a taxpayer. I've never committed a crime. I've always respected this nation without losing my responsibility. I have no issue with the referendum result. I have a big issue, a really big issue, to the point that I am considering seriously going home with the way the campaign was conducted. And I'd just like to say to Nigel, I am not the reason for this country's problems, and neither are the 3.5 million people in this country.
What about the growing population, though? I mean, I don't think anybody is saying, I haven't heard anybody say, somebody who's Portuguese, who's lived here for 20 years, should leave. 29. I don't think anybody, even the most extreme spokesperson, has said you should be leaving.
Really?
Absolutely. I don't think that's going to happen at all. Do you really think that's going to happen? I mean, I understand why it might be worrying, but isn't the real argument is about future numbers? It was an issue about controlling immigration, And the fact we've had these new figures today, the population is still growing by about 1/3 every year. And that is something people are concerned about.
Okay, what I will say to you, what I will say to anybody, is go out on the streets, speak to I certainly, from my experiences with my community, go and speak to people and ask them what they really think. Believe you me, the last 3 years, for the likes of me, have been extremely uncomfortable. We've been made out on everywhere that we're the dregs of society. I've been made to feel like I'm to blame for this.
Okay, well, I'm sorry to hear that, and I can't speak for Nigel, I can only speak for myself, but I don't think many people are saying that. It may feel like that, but I suspect it's really an issue about numbers. Now, if you've just tuned in and wondering where the Nigel Farage show is, well, Nigel is in Washington, but there's been a security incident, nothing I don't think to be extremely concerned about, but it's at the CPAC conference where the show was coming from live. We're going to cross now to LBC's US correspondent Simon Marks and find out exactly what has happened.
Hello, Clive. To think that I almost went to the conference to be with Nigel for his broadcast tonight. Let me tell you what's happened. As listeners obviously know, Nigel travels around a lot and spends quite a bit of time either in Brussels or in New York or here in Washington, D.C. And when he's on this side of the Atlantic, he usually does his programme from our studio in Washington, D.C. But today he wanted to do it from the CPAC conference. CPAC is the Conservative Political Action Committee. And he was wise to try and do the programme from the conference because there have been a whole range of top-flight speakers appearing at CPAC just within the last few minutes. President Trump's chief strategist, Stephen Bannon, and also his White House Chief of Staff, Reince Priebus, have been addressing delegates at that conference. And a little bit later on this afternoon here in the United States, Vice President Mike Pence will be at the hotel complex down in Washington's National Harbor, where the CPAC conference is taking place, to address the faithful there. And so we created the opportunity, a broadcast position at the CPAC conference from which Nigel was going to do his programme and indeed started to do his programme. But as you know, suddenly everybody was told they had to stop broadcasting as a security sweep of the conference facility is carried out. And my assumption is that that security sweep relates to Mike Pence's appearance at CPAC in a few hours' time. President Trump himself will be there tomorrow. These security sweeps are usually well publicised ahead of time. On this occasion, we certainly were unaware that we were not going to be able to continue broadcasting from what is basically an area where a whole host of different broadcasters have been putting out their radio and television programmes throughout the day at CPAC. I don't know how long the security sweep is going to last, but judging by previous security sweeps that I've endured at places like the presidential debates last year and the political conventions, it could go on for a couple of hours. So it's not yet clear whether we'll be able to get Nigel back on the air this evening. He's certainly going to have a story to tell once it's all over. Let me just give you a quick flavour of what's been going on at that CPAC conference. He was quite keen to be there because he wanted to see what Stephen Bannon had to say to the delegates. Both Stephen Bannon, the president's chief strategist, and White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus impressed upon the conservative delegates there, and these are people on the right wing of the Republican Party, that President Trump every single day is going about the business of implementing the promises that he made to the American people. And Stephen Bannon, not for the first time, launched a broadside against the media in the United States, referring to them again as the opposition party in America. Here's just a brief clip of what Stephen Bannon had to say a few minutes ago at CPAC.
They're corporatist, globalist media that are adamantly opposed to an economic nationalist agenda like Donald Trump has.
And he went on, Clive, to say that if anybody thought media coverage of Donald Trump was going to get better, they were wrong. He's confident it's only going to get worse.
OK, Simon, thanks very much indeed. Simon Marks, LBC's US correspondent. Well, it is the Nigel Farage show, and he's going to be a guest on his own programme now because we've got Nigel on the phone. What's been going on?
Clive, thank you. When a guy with a gun and a Secret Service badge comes up to you and says more than one time, move, that's what you do. My understanding of it, I was sort of explaining, I know Simon Marks has, that this big Conservative conference has been going since the mid-1960s. It's a massive event with about 10,000 delegates. And, of course, they're in very, very good cheer with Trump having won the presidency. And what happened was today there was a late addition to the speaker roster of the Vice President, Mike Pence, and they've literally, the Secret Service, decided to sweep the building clear. So 10,000 people plus the media pack and everybody are all being forced out into, I'm pleased to say, the sunshine, but I'm not sure we're going to be getting back in any time soon. So when the Americans do security, they don't do it by halves.
But not a cause for alarm, though. It is basically a routine security sweep, but a surprise one.
Well, I think it's a surprise one because I think that Pence wasn't actually due to speak on the agenda, and I guess decided he wanted to, and so they're taking no chances. They're literally going to sweep everybody out of the building. You may have heard, listeners may have heard dogs barking towards
yes.
the by transmission. A lot of Alsatians, I think they were. So they're literally going to completely screen the building right now with metal detectors, dogs, you name it, and then let everybody back in, and then Pence will come and speak. And I'm guessing that with the president speaking at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, the queues to get in here are going to be absolutely huge.
Nigel, thanks very much indeed for that update. Nigel, safe and sound, but a big security sweep, a surprise security sweep, has cleared everybody out, the building evacuated at that Conservative Political Action Conference. We're going to continue with your calls on this big issue of the day, the new net migration figures, 0345 6060 973. And if Nigel gets back into the building, we'll be hearing more from him as well. It's 7:30 on LBC, the news now with Rupert Bartia.
A woman's died after being struck by falling debris in Wolverhampton during high winds from Storm Doris. A schoolgirl, meanwhile, is in a life-threatening condition after a ceiling collapsed in a school sports hall in Milton Keynes. The weather's also caused significant disruption to train services across the country. London Midland and Virgin customers are being urged not to travel this evening. A man convicted of murdering his fiancée, the children's author Helen Bailey, has been jailed for 34 years. Ian Stewart spent weeks poisoning his partner before smothering her at the home they shared in Hertfordshire last year. LBC weather. Winds easing through the evening to leave wintry showers in northern parts, a low of 1 Celsius. Tomorrow, mostly dry with sunny spells, a high of 10 degrees.
LBC Travel. Good evening, I'm Andy Lake. Well, Storm Doris continues to cause big problems across the rail network tonight. From St Pancras, East Midlands trains are running a very limited service with severe delays, but Thameslink remains suspended to and from St Albans. From Euston, Virgin Trains West Coast are running a very limited service but with severe delays, and London Midland are running a severely limited service. From King's Cross, Virgin Trains East Coast are running a very limited service with delays of up to 3 hours there. From Liverpool Street, Greater Anglia are suspended to and from Cambridge, with Stansted Express services being diverted via Seven Sisters. From Waterloo, South West trains have delays of up to an hour across their network. From Victoria, Southern are running a reduced service to and from Brighton with delays across their network as well. And the Gatwick Express is running a reduced service. Many other routes also severely disrupted. And as for the tubes, the Bakerloo and District Line still suffering severe delays tonight. Onto the roads now. The QE2 bridge on the M25 is now open. Good news there. It was closed because of Storm Doris all afternoon. The Dartford Tunnel isn't fully open just yet. I'll keep you updated. Still bad delays though. Queues from Junction 3 for Swanley and clockwise from Junction 29 for the A127. Also delays on the A2, the A12 and the A13 heading in and out of London. Several other roads also very slow or shut, so make sure you do double check before you travel tonight. And in Cambridgeshire, the M11 is closed in both directions between Junction 8 for Bishop Stortford and Junction 10 for Duxford. A lorry overturned around Saffron Walden earlier on. It means it's hardly moving between Cambridge and Harlow. Horrible severe delays there. For more real-time traffic updates, go to lbc.co.uk.
This is LBC.
A big night out. A lumpy bed. There are so many things that can keep us awake. But if you can't sleep because you're worried about paying the bills, we can help. Capitalise provides free, impartial and confidential face-to-face support to help people in trouble manage their debt. Find out more at capitalise.org.uk.
This is important health information for people aged 65 and over. Cold weather can make you more likely to catch a winter illness that could become very serious. So if you start to feel unwell, even if it's just a cough or a cold, seek advice from your pharmacist before it gets more serious. NHS. We're all here to help you stay well this winter.
At Oak Furnitureland, everyone knows our furniture is 100% real hardwood.
And it's also 50% off.
But most importantly, it's 100% real hardwood.
Yes, but don't forget it's also 50% off.
Make sure you don't miss Oak Furnitureland's biggest ever winter sale, where everything's 100% real hardwood with up to 50% off. Our biggest ever winter sale ends Sunday. Plus, this weekend only, get 2 free gifts worth up to £600 when you spend £1,500.
Do you have a pension? Maybe you've got more than one. How do you know if they're in the right pension funds, making as much money as possible for your retirement? Answer is, you probably don't. At The Pension Works, our fully qualified independent financial advisors could add instant value to your retirement fund. Simply text the word YES to 83222 for your free Pension Works health check. That's YES to 83222 today. Your pensions working harder with The Pension Works.
At Red or White Tonight, we make recommendations based on what you like. It's great wine without the faff. Order now at redorwhitetonight.com. Always drink responsibly.
Hey London, WestJet would like to invite you to Canada. Check out our direct flights and low fares to see just how inviting it is. Now you're thinking, Canada, here I come, and wondering, what can I bring? Well, if it's the Rocky Mountains, you bring your breath, we'll bring what will take it away. A night out in Toronto? You bring the paint, we'll bring the town. Niagara Falls? You bring your honey, we'll bring the moon. Book today with Canada's high-care, low-fare airline at westjet.com or call your travel agent.
The Nigel Farage Show, live from Washington, only on LBC.
Well, it was live from Washington, but Nigel is indeed in Washington at the Conservative Political Action Conference, where he's going to be a speaker. But there's been a security sweep, as this tweet rather amusingly puts it, crazy times. Nigel Farage needing to phone his own LBC show due to US Secret Service's intense surprise sweep of the building that he was broadcasting from, which pretty much sums up the situation. Listeners earlier might have heard during one call some dogs, and I thought, well, they do sound like guard dogs. Turns out they were, and the whole building has been cleared, probably because Mike Pence, the Vice President, is due to arrive there a little later. So we may hear from Mr Farage a little bit later on. I'm Clive Bull here in London. Now, I was due to be here at 8 to talk about this very topic anyway, so I'm stepping in a little bit early at the moment. We'll keep you updated on the situation in Washington, and we'll continue to take your calls on this issue. And if you've just tuned in, the issue we're looking at really is the new net migration figures, which show a slight drop. They fell by 49,000 to 273,000 last year, and this includes 3 months of the Brexit vote. So it is a drop. Is it due to Brexit? Is it due to people leaving? Nigel Farage earlier on was talking about the need for an emergency brake, because although there's a drop, there's also a very big rise in people coming from Romania and Bulgaria, possibly because the clock is now ticking. Let's take some more calls. 0345 6060 973. Prakash in Camberwell. Hello.
Hi, good evening, Clive, and
Evening.
thanks for coming to the rescue.
No, my pleasure.
Look, I've got concerns about the government's immigration strategy. I think it's fundamentally flawed, and I think old Theresa May is being a bit mean about this whole thing and creating some unnecessary nervousness around Brexit. I mean, I believe the position she should be taking is for all those people from the EU that came into this country up to the 23rd of June 2016 to have the right of residency of living here, subject to fulfilling certain conditions. For example, they haven't perhaps obtained any criminal convictions whilst they've been here. And I think the other thing is for her to put up to say, look, to the EU, we'll have 0% tariffs providing you don't have tariffs on us. And I think that would help ease the relationships. At the moment, she's not easing relationships. She's winding people up by taking what appears to be a very macho position, but in actual fact, it's going to come back and bite us anyway.
But if we're talking about a negotiation, then at this stage, she's playing the game of looking tough, and that is what you do in a deal, isn't it?
But Clive, we know that ultimately we're going to have to make concessions in this area. Why not show goodwill? Why not show the EU the way to go? Because they're going to look pretty foolish if they start imposing a different set of conditions around the position of British nationals living currently living in the EU. They're going to have to comply with that as well. It's one thing having a negotiation over things that are of a substantive nature, but things that we know that we're going to have to take we're going to have to make concessions on. Why not make those concessions early and get the awkward stuff out the way? For example, it would calm the fears of a lot of people living here. It would also give a clear signal to those that are planning to live here that they wouldn't get automatic.
Did you hear our caller earlier from Portugal, who did sound genuinely very, very worried? He's lived here for 29 years.
Absolutely.
And he did sound worried. I mean, personally, I don't think he's got anything to worry about.
You're quite right. And that's a really good example of this. He shouldn't have to feel worried, but she's creating this environment and it's not helping anybody.
Well, on the other hand, what are we really talking about? I mean, if Article 50 is triggered fairly soon, which I imagine it will be, then we're only talking about a month or two until negotiations and wheeling and dealing starts.
But as Nigel implied in what he was saying earlier, those negotiations could go on for several years. And in the meantime, there could be people coming here, or there could be a large number of people. If there's a kind of date that we've set, that almost sets the scene as to what happens thereafter.
Thank you very much, Prakash in Camberwell. 0345 6060 973 is the number. I'm Clive Bull, stepping in early as Nigel Farage has been cut off in his prime at the Conservative Political Action Conference, where he was broadcasting live from Washington, and he is due to speak. And the Vice President, Mike Pence, is due to speak as well, but there has been a surprise and very intensive security sweep, which meant all broadcasters, including LBC, including Nigel Farage, were effectively swept out of the building at no notice, with guns, with dogs. The whole room was cleared. And so we had to terminate the live broadcast, at least for now. But we're still taking your calls on this issue. If you want to have your say, then call us here at LBC. Let's go to Olu in Greenwich. Hello, Olu.
Hi, Clive. How are you doing?
Yeah, very good. What can we do for you?
As disheartening as it is for me to say, I actually agree with Nigel Farage to an extent. He makes the point that during the negotiations, we could see a massive increase in European migrants coming to the UK, which is he makes a very, very good point. However, I don't.
Well, is there any evidence of that though?
Exactly.
I mean, it depends how you interpret it. I mean,
exactly.
Net migration is actually down.
Exactly, and that's the point I wanted to make. That's not certain. One, and number two, this country is going through a massive, massive change when it comes to leaving the EU. And the whole campaign, before the referendum, during the referendum, and, everything that's happened after the referendum, there's been a massive friction between people in this country where, some people feel like they've been targeted, some people feel like racism has come back to an extent. Asking for a restriction on, Europeans coming to the UK is not the answer to fixing that friction that's happened.
Well, I mean, there was originally, it was offered, this idea of an emergency brake, and if it turned out that there was a massive rush, and there is some figures to show that in the last set of figures that particularly there was an increase in people from Bulgaria and Romania. There is this possibility of an emergency brake. On the other hand, as we were saying with the last caller, if you're in delicate negotiations, you're talking about what happens to those who are here already. Do you want to throw something in like this, a spanner in the works?
I wanted to agree with the last caller on something. He said something about easing the relationship, finding the best way. There's already bad blood between UK and, some of the EU members. We need to find a way to ease that relationship and make that relationship better. Asking for a restriction doesn't do that. It if anything, it makes the relationship.
Do you think there will be, though, a rush towards Britain? Because that's, again, if you dig down into these figures, it looks like some people are rushing towards Britain, but an awful lot of people are also leaving. In fact, record numbers are leaving, possibly because they don't like being here.
Exactly. So as much as there might be a rush into Britain, people are also leaving. And another point I wanted to make is, if you then ask for a restriction, what happens if they ask for that restriction right back at us? So we in the UK, we're restricted when we're going to,
I think we're better getting on with the negotiations as quickly as possible, really, aren't we?
Exactly. Get on with the negotiations as quickly as possible and stop worrying about this whole restriction. You need to try and ease the relationship, and putting a restriction on travel from people coming into the UK from the EU, for me, is not the answer. It causes more friction in the country, and it's not the answer to the relationship.
Do you accept the basic point, though, that net migration is huge, that it's 1/3 people a year, and that the population is growing potentially unsustainably, and we have to deal with that. We have to either provide for 1/3 people, or we have to cut that figure down. You have to do one or the other.
That's very true. You do have to do one or the other. But Clive, listen, population has been growing for as long as I can remember. It's not just the UK,
but it is faster now.
Population is growing. Pardon?
It is faster now, though. If you look at the graph, it has been going up all the time. Yeah, that is very true. Olu, thank you very much. More calls coming on this. 0345 6060 973. If you've just tuned in, I'm Clive Bull here in London, stepping in a little early because Nigel Farage has been swept out of the building in Washington at the Conservative Political Action Conference, the CPAC conference, where all sorts of people are going to be speaking, including Nigel Farage and Steve Bannon, Mike Pence, the Vice President. So no wonder the Secret Service have cleared the building with a security sweep. So Nigel cut off almost mid-sentence. We'll have more in a moment here on LBC. It's 7:46.
This is LBC.
I have cancer. I'm cold. I'm behind with my bills. Can I afford to get to the hospital? Will I lose my job, my home?
Macmillan Cancer Support can help with money worries, so they don't spiral out of control.
I'm warm. I can get help with transport. I will keep my job and my home. I have cancer.
For our free financial information and support, call now or search Macmillan Money Worries. Macmillan Cancer Support. No one should face cancer alone.
Switch to electric this February, because sometimes it's the quiet things that make the biggest noise. The 100% electric Nissan Leaf, now with an extra £500 deposit contribution at 0% APR representative during our Electric February event. Plus, 1 year's free insurance, 2 years free servicing, and of course, no petrol or diesel costs. Now that's something to keep quiet about. The Nissan Electric February event ends 28th of February. Nissan, innovation that excites.
Nissan Finance, 0% APR representative. Participating dealers only. Excludes Visiograde. Subject to status, over 25s only. T's and C's at nissan.co.uk/electric February.
Zingflowers.com. Fresh, hand-tied bouquets with easy online ordering.
Zing flowers are amazing every time.
What if someone else did all the donkey work to find out if you had PPI for free? Well, that's exactly what we do here at the Claims Guys. Just text EASY to 60777 and we'll do the digging to discover if you ever had PPI added to one of your accounts. After that, you can pursue the claim yourself or ask us to do it for you. It's your choice. But if you don't text EASY to 60777, you'll never know. The Claims Guys, the PPI people.
The Claims Guys.
Do you suffer from breathlessness? A lung disease? Maybe you have another long-term condition such as diabetes, heart or kidney disease. Cold weather can make you more likely to catch a winter illness that could become very serious. So at the first sign of a winter illness, even if it's just a cough or a cold, seek advice from your pharmacist before it gets more serious. NHS, we're all here to help you stay well this winter.
What is the longest tube on the London Underground? What is the collective name for a group of bears? What did Queen Victoria ban from her own funeral?
If you know, you have exceptional general knowledge. But at Hiscox, our insurance experts have chosen small business as their specialist subject. That's why more than 200,000 UK businesses rely on us to help provide the right cover. Hiscox, business insurance for the small and the brave.
Oh, and in case you were wondering, A, the central line, B, a sleuth of bears, C, the colour black.
This is LBC, the Nigel Farage Show. Live from Washington, call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Tweet at LBC using the hashtag Farage on LBC.
Yes, this is LBC. I'm Clive Bull here in London, stepping in a little early because Nigel Farage was cut off in his prime, and he was broadcasting from the CPAC conference in Washington. So if you're expecting to hear Nigel, well, he was here earlier on, live on LBC, but was removed from the building along with everybody else by the US Secret Service. We think it's a security sweep ahead of the arrival of the Vice President, Mike Pence. And if you've just tuned in, we're still taking your calls, though, on this issue of net migration. If you'd like to have your say, 0345 6060 973. You can also text 84850. So let's cross back to Washington. And Nigel Farage, where are you now, then?
Well, out in the sunshine, milling around in a crowd. They're just about to let us all back in the building. But as you can imagine, the extrication of over 10,000 people, the clearing by all the sniffer dogs has taken a very long time. So we're all about to go back in, and we will then listen to Vice President Pence. So I apologise for the timing. I didn't know it was going to happen, and I thank you, Clive, for manfully stepping in.
And tell us a bit about this conference, the CPAC conference, then. Who's going to be speaking? What are you expecting?
Well, it's been going, as I say, since 1965, and every year, these are the real activists in the American Republican Party who come together every year. There are big public speeches, but there are also training sessions on, the latest computer technology to identify potential voters, canvassing techniques. So it's all about conservative action. The last time that a Republican president spoke to this crowd of people was Ronald Reagan back in 1981. And Trump spoke at this convention in 2015 when he'd first announced that he was going to run for president. And President Trump speaks tomorrow at 10 a.m. And I would think this crowd here are going to go absolutely wild.
And you're going to be speaking as well, is that right?
Yes, I am. I'm speaking as Trump speaks. There's a short panel, and I'm then on at midday. So I'm the only foreigner who'll be speaking at this conference. And I guess I'm going to be talking really about Brexit, what's happening with Brexit. But basically, there's almost nobody here who thinks that Trump could have won without Brexit. It was Brexit that showed that the establishment could be beaten. It was Brexit that showed that whatever the media say, whatever the polls say, that actually, if enough people are prepared to go out and vote, you can change the world. So they look upon Brexit here very, very fondly indeed.
What are you expecting Donald Trump to say?
What I'm expecting him to say is we're in office, we're doing our best to put in place the programme upon which we were elected, and we're being frustrated by the courts, we're being frustrated by some states, but they won't stop us. I'm going to make sure you get what you voted for, because it's, there is a fair degree of obstructionism that's been going on in America, particularly with that attempt. And all it was, and this is an interesting thing, all it was an attempt for 90 days to suspend people coming from those 7 countries, and that was effectively ruled by the courts to be unconstitutional. So, he's got some battles to fight.
He's going to be with friends, though. I presume he's going to be very, very well received at this conference.
Oh, he will be, because these are the people that put in the hard yards. these are the people that traipse the streets, these are the people that man the polling stations, and also these are the people sitting in certain rows that help to fund a lot of his campaign. So, yeah, he's very much here amongst friends, and it's very much a message to say don't be complacent, because, I mean, just as with our country, the electoral process here is unending. Every year the receipts that come up for Congress, for Senate, for everything else. And in 2018, they have what are called the midterm elections, when a lot of seats come up. So it's almost, this country is almost on a sort of permanent electoral footing. And he'll be saying to them, just keep going, guys.
Nigel Farage, you will be back on Monday?
I certainly will, in the safety of London.
Right, well, thanks very much indeed. Enjoy the sunshine. Standing outside the building in Washington, that CPAC conference. He will be speaking there along with Vice President Mike Pence. Donald Trump will be speaking, and it'll be very interesting to witness all of that as well. So we've got a few minutes left. We'll take a couple more calls. Martin in Huntingdon. Hello, Martin.
Hello, Clive.
Hi.
Hi. I really wanted to talk about the net migration, but first of all, with regard to the last call you had, I find it's the EU...
Nigel from Washington?
Sorry, no, I mean who called in.
Oh, the other one, yes.
I don't remember his name. Yeah, the guest.
Yes.
It's basically the EU which has been bullying us from day one when we try to leave. So I agree with you. You don't put all your cards on the table when you're going to get nothing back from the opposition.
Well, this is this issue of whether to play it hardball or give something. I mean, yes, you're referring to the caller who was saying, well, maybe if we took the high ground, if we said to people like our Portuguese caller earlier on, don't worry, got nothing to worry about. Do you think we really do have something to lose if we did that?
I think we will, because we've seen what happened with Cameron. He went over there and he came back with nothing. So, with the best will in the world, you don't negotiate from a platform of weakness. But Clive, if I may, what I really want to say about the net migration, we don't really know who's actually coming in, but nor do we know who's actually leaving. How many people are leaving this country? British people with skills, with knowledge, experience, people we need in this country who, frankly, have had enough. And they're going out with families. And they're contributing to other countries. Others are going out to retire, I know. But we're getting in a lot of people who have nothing to really offer except for cheap labour. They can afford to get a crowd into one house, and which they pay probably more money than they should, in order for them to be able to work at a lower wage than the minimum. And then you have these team leaders working in gangs. We've seen people coming over, young women being forced into prostitution, the same way as people going out into the fields. I'm not saying they're all doing this, but it is happening. And we need to know who's coming into this country and whether we really want them.
Yes, it's interesting that these figures, in fact, one of the things I'm going to dig into in the next hour is what these figures really show, because they aren't a full picture. It's almost impossible to get a full picture of who's leaving, who's coming in, where they're from, what they want to do. Some of that data is available, but not all of it. It's pretty much just a survey rather than a check on exactly who is in, out, and where they've come from. But we'll try and dig into that a little bit more in the next hour.
I have next door neighbours. They're Romanian. I honestly couldn't wish for better neighbours. But at the end of the day, we need to know who is coming in and what they can offer. My wife went into hospital. Now, we were told 15 years ago in Hinchinbrook there were 400 beds. Today, it's 198. And this is nothing unusual, and I know many of the people there, the staff, they've been absolutely fantastic. And they came from all over the world. And they're people who are contributing if they're not born here. But at the same time, we've got so many more people coming in. When my wife went in on that Monday night, it was absolute chaos.
All right, Martin, I'm only stopping you because I'd like to squeeze in one more person who's been waiting patiently in Bromley. Kevin, we've got a minute or so. What would you like to say?
Good evening, Clive.
Evening.
Well, I voted to leave, but I certainly didn't vote to get anybody kicked out of the country. I simply voted to leave to get our sovereignty back, to have control of our borders, and to certainly slow down immigration until the government puts sufficient funds into housing education, the NHS, to tackle the congestion problem on our roads, which has increased dramatically with an additional 5 million people in Blair's time. Parking problems, we've got too many people and the infrastructure can't cope. I'd like to be able to make a phone call to my doctor and get an appointment the next day, but you can't do that. I used to be able to do it.
Do you think realistically, though, given that we haven't controlled the bit that we have got control of, if you see what I mean, which is non-EU migration, that's not gone down in terms of net figures. So do you think we can reduce net migration?
If it was a war situation, they could stop it immediately, couldn't they? They need to. It's the government.
Theresa May staked her.
Caused the problem.
She had a target. She's sticking to that target. She's nowhere near it. Kevin, thank you very much indeed. We'll continue with calls here on LBC on this issue, and a reminder that Nigel Farage will be back at this time Monday, 7 p.m. here on LBC. Now, coming up in the next hour, the government says that it's still aiming, as I say, for this net migration target of tens of thousands. But is that figure, first of all, desirable, and secondly, even possible? Are the latest figures evidence of a Brexit effect? Is that why more people are leaving? And with much of this drop down to fewer international students, should they even be included in the figures? So we'll talk about that. We'll also have the Property Hour coming up at 9. If you'd like to join in, then call right now. 0345 6060 973. That's the number here at LBC.